Hey, hi, howdy, hello, I am Superdude, and can I just be honest with you? I can't stop playing climbing games. They're too fascinating. Climbing is just the perfect subject for the medium of video games. The controls, whether arcade or simulational, are nevertheless understandable on the physical level, because almost everyone in the world has experienced climbing in some form. On rocks, on piles of dirt or snow, trees, jungle gyms, rock walls, both man-made and world-made. Climbing is in our bones, and that allows us to easily synchronize with the character on screen. Put another way, climbing has high verisimilitude, a word meaning how believable is the fiction you're presented with. How believable do you find this story, this character's actions? Does this place feel real? And for video games, these mechanics, do they help pull you into the setting? Do you actually feel like Spider-Man and all that? And climbing is a game mechanic that naturally offers high verisimilitude. Even in cases where the climbing is visually abstracted, such as in the first game we're going to talk about, it doesn't take much brain work to imagine what your character is doing, imagining the legs and arms stretching out to move onward and upward. But all this talk is more a comment on the animations, if anything. If we were playing as, say, a pot-bodied fellow with a sledgehammer to climb, all of a sudden that's a lot less intuitive, right? And mechanically hard to parse. But not so with the typical character. I'm a person, and using my body, my arms, and my legs, I need to get up there. The question is how? How are these arms simulated? How do I move them? Where am I going? And what is the wind condition? Climbing may be easy to grok, but that only gets people at the door. How do you make it fun? That is the purpose of this video. To look at a bunch of different games I've gotten a little autistic about and see how their distinct interpretations of climbing change the experience, evoking different tones and genres by taking a different crack at the universal act of climbing. Starting from the most basic question, what are we climbing towards? What's the wind condition, basically? The most standard goal for a climbing game, and the peak of climbing or hiking in real life, is, well, a peak. Mountains are the obvious setting for climbing games, and many have taken this tact to great success. Peak, Jusant, Celeste, A Short Hike, Cairn, to name just the ones that are off the top of my head. It's a popular setting for designing an initially chillaxed climb that gets more daunting and more difficult as you progress. A perfect difficulty curve for a video game, which offers high verisimilitude. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But not every game begins on a mountain. Some begin in a hole and dare you to escape that pit with your sanity intact, such as in our first example, White Knuckle. There are no mountains to be seen here, but kilometers of metal, rebar, and concrete. Your task is to climb as fast as you can up and out of this facility in order to avoid being consumed by that. A mass of faces and flesh that wants nothing more than to add yours to its collection. The closer you are to it, the more menacing the music becomes, so our goal is obvious. Down bad, up good. Climbing is pretty simple. Each hand maps to the corresponding mouse buttons. Hold them down to hold onto a handhold in the environment. Simple and intuitive, though learning the rhythm of hold left, let go right, hold right, let go left can take some getting used to. The environment is littered with handholds and spots to grab onto if you're perceptive, but that's the thing. Time is an expensive resource to waste, and sometimes you don't have the time to look for the predestined route through the level, or worse, you're cut off from accessing it. That's where your items come in. Rebar, piton, and your trusty hammer will provide grapple points if you need some, though pitons need to be hammered in to be truly effective. And also, while we're here, there are a lot of ways to pronounce that word I just said, piton. Sometimes, including some of the games that I'm going to talk about later, are going to pronounce it pitons, pitons, perhaps. I, from playing Peak, decided to call it piton, so that's what I'm sticking with. Sorry if that's annoyingly French for you. Get over it. Anyway, items can be stored with Q and E for easy access to the corresponding hand, and Tab will open your greater inventory for all your other goodies. Sometimes you will literally climb to the top of a point and need to hammer in the piton in midair, which takes some maneuvering. Grab the piton from your quick slot, or open the menu, all the while remembering to hold the mouse button down with your holding hand, lest you risk falling into that. Punch it into the wall, switch hands, pull the hammer out, give it a few whacks, and get moving. And all the while, your stamina is dropping, your hands turning red, threatening a premature end to your run if you aren't quick with all that menuing and hand switching. That's at the heart of White Knuckle. This control scheme requires simultaneous holds with efficient menuing. Reminds me of the pat your head, rub your belly trick you'd do as a kid, but if you mess it up this time, you die. And that's the trick here. Between the monsters, the creeping miasma below, and your own hand strength, it's a mad dash to the top, requiring quick thinking and precise control of your character to stay ahead of the mass. A gameplay loop that's designed to stress you out, which is in service to White Knuckle's horror sensibilities, though it doesn't scare you through jump scares. It's more the threat of failure that's putting you on the knife's edge, pushing your hands to the limit, knowing a single mistake could end your run. And the visuals are uncanny in that PlayStation 1 way that's all the rage right now, which does add to the horror in a roundabout way. These low poly monsters don't make much sense. I want to spend more time looking at them, try to understand what it is I'm seeing, but I don't have time to waste. The miasma, remember? One of the oldest tricks in the horror book is that the viewer's imagination is far scarier than anything you could show on screen. So the longer you can go without showing your monster, the more tension you can squeeze from its presence. Some genres of horror push this even further by making their monsters impossible to fully comprehend. Trying to describe the beasties can take multiple paragraphs, which is the signature move of Lovecraftian horror, and it's a strategy that works well in the visual medium. Just look at this thing. Its silhouette is messy, and it coats the environment with its corruption, let's call it. It's hard to tell what this thing begins and ends, and while I don't personally think this is scary, it does achieve the goal of being a monster you cannot see all that well, even as I'm looking directly at it. Everything I've said about the game so far has been in the first major leg of the ascent. Make it far enough and the miasma stops being a concern, but entirely new horrors await you farther up. Different variations on that main gameplay loop that change the relationship between your hands and what you want to hold in the quick item slots, challenging your ability to menu and make on-the-fly decisions in different, new ways. I was truly surprised by all the different challenges I found in my ascent. If White Knuckle was just an infinite chamber of that first leg, I still would have thought it was a good game, and it does have a game mode that's similar to that, if that's your taste. But there's a lot of effort on display as they mix up the gameplay formula higher up the spire that I really appreciated. They didn't have to do that. And there will probably be more added because, well, it's important to note that White Knuckle is not actually finished. It's in early access, and as I was writing this, it received a sizable update that implies a way more run-based direction in the future, with perks and debuffs that heavily modify your ascent and affect your ending score. The campaign does have an ending to it, but who's to say if this is the true ending? They've added more areas to the end in the past, and the roadmap doesn't suggest a full release within the next year either, so who's to say how big White Knuckle will be on full release? But what is here is already excellent. A brisk but dense horror arcade climbing game, and I recommend it to everyone looking for a climbing game with a little bit of a kick to it. But perhaps you find the scares in White Knuckle a little too mild, some real white people in the Taco Bell levels of heat. I will admit that White Knuckle is more of a horror aesthetic than a true thriller, so let's look at something with a bit more spice in it. Idols of Ash is a horror climbing game with a much simpler set of controls and goals. Unlike every other game we'll see today, here you're climbing down. Much easier than going up. Thanks, gravity! And rather than using your hands to descend these ruins, all you have here is a grappling hook. Latch onto a flat surface and use that tether to pull yourself up, safely rappel down, or swing to a better vantage point. Once you're out in the open air, all your movement is contingent on your line and momentum, which feels pretty good to control, though I will note that because I'm left-handed, the character throwing the hook from the right got me in trouble a lot. I would anticipate the hook coming from the left, my dominant hand, it would then launch off to the right, and I overcommitted to my movement and would literally jump to my death. Oops. Funny little accessibility thing I felt like I would mention. No game is a perfect fit for everybody, but that's definitely not a critique. I'm not holding that against the game. It's not even that big a deal, really, because the level doesn't change at all between attempts, so this should be easy, right? Just find the optimal path and stick to it, I hear you say, but it ain't so simple in Idols of Ash because of this game's main selling point. Somewhere below, there is a centipede. A very, very, very big centipede. It's not particularly fast, but it's persistent and consistent in its desire to eat you alive, so you need to move. Just like with White Knuckle, the descent would be too difficult if I had time to think. In fact, I believe this game is easier than White Knuckle overall, but that assumes I'm thinking rationally. White Knuckle's creeping miasma isn't frightening, it's more of a gameplay incentive with a spooky coat of paint than an actual terrible threat. But the centipede is in a league of its own. And you know, I've played a lot of horror games in my life. I love the psychological stuff. I love the gory stuff. I was there when PT was first popping off. I've been a fan of Dead Space since 2012. I'm a veteran in this genre is what I'm saying, or at least for how old I am, and I cannot explain with words how deep into the animal part of my brain this centipede makes me go. But I shall try. When I was 9 years old, I saw Peter Jackson's King Kong for the first time, a movie about a big monkey killing T-Rexes. Sounds rad, right? Little boys would love that shit, right? Well, it would be, but there is a scene in that movie that I was too young to see and continues to terrify me to this day. We're pretty deep into the movie at this point. The whole crew's crashed on Skull Island. Anne's been captured by the titular King Kong, and we've been looking for her for probably an hour or more, when finally, the surviving crew fall into a ravine filled with giant bugs that proceed to reintroduce the overly confident humans to their place in this island's food chain. Worms and bugs pour into the ravine and crawl out of every surface and kill these people in ways that I wish I could repress. There's a pit in my stomach as I'm writing this. I'm going to hate editing it, and even the video game adaptation is very faithful to how terrifying these f***ing bugs are. There's a video by Noodle about that adaptation if you're curious. All this to say, I am a smidge entomophobic, but for a giant bug, my amygdala sounds the alarm. I fully panic when the centipede is close to me. Blind terror I've never felt from a video game in my life. Only the Silent Hill series has approached this level of terror for me, and it's not even close. To reiterate, the game itself isn't too difficult, but the centipede changes the risk assessment, pushing you, or perhaps just me, to make some pretty dicey jumps and throws, and landing a momentum-based grapple hook feels amazing when the alternative is a long fall to certain death, or worse, being eaten. But that's actually where the magic is. Without the threat of the centipede, I tend to lean towards hooking aside and simply sliding down the wall, the conventional wisdom that players will optimize the fun out of a game holding true for me here. There's no drama, no skill expression in me just sliding down the wall, so the centipede denies you the safe option. You must rush, go for that risky hook mid-flight, swing to a different vantage point to outsmart the monster, and in so doing, you're engaging with the game on a deeper level, and actually having fun. There is a mod that will remove the centipede if you really need something like that, but I think this is a much lesser game without its presence, and I say that as someone who can't control how much they scream when it's close by. On a somewhat related note, there is a lot of style in this game's falling animation. Fall for too long and your character starts to tumble in the air. Now aiming your hook is practically impossible and you have ample time to reflect on your choices before the sudden stop at the end. With multiple game modes, each unlocked after beating the last, including another level, there's plenty of replayability and further scares if you really think you've mastered the centipede. And the best part? The game's $3. That's coffee money, baby. A Dave single costs more than that. I'm not saying this is the game I want you to try the most in this video, that's the next two, but at that price point, it's an effortless sell. You really should give it a try. Again, it's worth like 2 candy bars. The horror is simple, but at least for me and my particular set of phobias, no game has been more effective at scaring me. I have ended sessions with Idols of Ash laughing at myself because I screamed so hard, tensed my body so much, that I hurt myself. I was sore from fear. I can offer no higher praise than that. Play this game, especially if bugs scare you, bugs of the creepy, crawly, leggy variety. So far we've been talking about a couple of arcadey climbers, and they're both horror. I swear I didn't do that on purpose. But as we swing more simulational, we start running into games like Jusant, where the management of your limbs and stamina is the name of the game. But this is a pretty basic system. To me, this feels like a step above Breath of the Wild's stamina bar, which itself is just one rung up the ladder from where most games are at with their climbing. It's a method of traversal, but not the purpose of the game itself. It facilitates the gameplay, it's not the gameplay. It's not fun in and of itself. Though arguably Assassin's Creed and Bring Me the Horizon, where did that come from? Though arguably Assassin's Creed and Breath of the Wild skirt the line here, they're definitely streamlined systems, but running across rooftops and being able to climb literally anything is like the coolest thing ever, so the mechanics are streamlined to encourage the player to chase that bliss. Like Insomniac's Marvel's, Spiders, Man's web slinging, almost all of the thought has been ironed out, so you can appreciate the speed and style of the movement, even if you're literally just pressing a button and setting the controller down. And no, I'm not exaggerating about that. In Spider-Man 2, you really can just click a button and then push in a direction and then put the controller down and it will move on its own. Yes, there are settings to make it so that you actually have to move the stick around, but there is no clicking. I remember when I was a kid and I would press a button to zip the web, like you used to be able to. Anyway, Jusant is just above that. It engages the player, but I wasn't engaged. You know what I mean? It's a very pretty game. I just wanted a bit more from a title that's all about climbing. And it turns out I wouldn't have to wait too long because just a few short years later, the game makers would release a simulation survival climbing game that was everything I'd hoped Jusant would be at release. But before we get to that, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. This video is brought to you by, well, me, and also you. I've never taken ads or sponsors, mostly because I'm not good with deadlines, so it is through the continued interest of y'all that I'm able to do this. Only 1 in every 5 people who watch are subscribed, fun fact, so subscribe if you're able. It's way more helpful than you'd think in getting videos shown to people who actually want to see them, or becoming a patron if that strikes your fancy. Either would be nice, but honestly, it's just nice to know that people give a crap about what's happening here. The first few videos that I made were because I wanted to write video essays, and also because I was having a mental breakdown, but the 5th video, the 10th, the whatever one we're on right now, that's all thanks to viewers like you, and I am nothing but thankful for your time and support. Once again, thank you. With that out of the way, what game was I just setting up? Alright, behold Cairn. A game that is, no exaggeration, currently my game of the year. I know we're only halfway through the year, but it's just that strong, mate. There's nothing about this game I don't like. Cairn takes nothing for granted as you climb Mount Kami, a legendary mountain that has taken many lives, and not one, not a soul, has ever reached the summit. But Ava, a world-renowned climber and your player character, is confident that she's got the stuff to make the trek. Rip to those people, but I'm different. The game reminds me of Death Stranding in a lot of ways. Not the story, by God, not the story, but many games have, to put it rudely, thoughtless traversal mechanics, as I said earlier. But these titles are different. Cairn's central ambition is to recreate through its mechanics the realities of mountain climbing within the mind of the player. Nothing about scaling this mountain is easy. You have to consider your limb positioning, your resources, and the state of your character before you can truly begin your ascent. Just like what Death Stranding did with walking, these mechanics turn what other games have abstracted out as a simple task of your strapping protagonist. Just push in a direction and off they go! Thoughtless traversal that's just meant to get you from gameplay moment to gameplay moment into thoughtful traversal. To start a climb, you move, one limb at a time, and grab onto the cliff face. The game will automatically pick the next limb for you, and you keep moving, arm over arm, leg over leg, up the wall, finding cracks, juts, and depressions to place your hands and feet into to give yourself as much leverage as possible. The texture of the cliff face is not for show. The game is simulating gravity's pull on Ava, so you want to take advantage of the rock's texture and practice good limb positioning to reduce the stress being dealt to Ava's arms and legs. If you're caught in a bad spot, whether that means no good handholds or you've mangled Ava's limb positioning, the limb under the most stress will start to shake and slip off the wall. If you push it too far, she'll start to panic, the screen will darken, and the camera zooms in to her worsening scenario. And if you don't fix it in time, she'll fall. Here in the tutorial zone, you could fall all you wish, but on the mountain, falling is almost always a death sentence. That's why you have your trusty climb bot with you, fitted with plenty of rope and pitons to secure your climbing route, and take what would have been a fall to certain death into a fall of, well, that really sucks. But hey, better than being dead, right? When I was first playing Cairn, I basically refused to use the pitons and would try to climb the face of the mountain as far as possible without using them, which meant any mistake I made would turn into an immediate death and I'd reload to the last checkpoint. This happened to me a lot, partially because I was being stubborn, and partially because I'm bad at using consumables, but I was also misunderstanding the purpose of the pitons. They are far more powerful than a potion or phoenix down. Yes, they can save your bacon, but they are also mini checkpoints as you continue up the mountain. Some of these cliff faces will take you upwards of 20 minutes before touching solid ground again, and that's gotta be murder on the forearms. If you're in a pinch, you can shake out your limbs a bit to get the blood flowing, but this is a band-aid solution to the problem of your muscles accumulating lactic acid. As much as Ava would like to climb forever, she is not a climbing cyborg. This is the second benefit of pitons. At a piton point, you could step off the cliffside and link to the piton, fully regaining stamina and having a moment to reconsider your options, as well as open your pack and eat some goodies. More on that later. Pitons are essentially reset points, and you should set them often, but how often? These are a finite resource, so you don't want to set them every 5 meters, but you also don't want to set them too far, as the distance from your rope to the last piton is how far you'll fall before the rope catches you. Do as I say, not as I do. Assuming a fall doesn't kill you, you could use the rope to climb back up to your last point, so it's nice to set them before a particularly hard leg of the journey, but sometimes you don't have that luxury. You only have so many of these bad boys, and setting them takes time, roughly 5 seconds if you're a beast like me, and while that's damn fast compared to the IRL method, if you're in panic mode, you can and will fall before you've finished your placement, which means you've fallen pretty far down, and you've left a piton, one of your most important resources, half set in the wall. Better go back up and get it. These two systems define how you interact with the wall, and both force the player to be deliberate with their actions. Every limb is placed with intention. Pitons should be set with the same level of care. Just like I said in the standalone video about Peak, making spur-of-the-moment changes in your plans mid-climb is usually a recipe for disaster. So if you're stuck, set a piton and reconsider your course. Or just climb down and try again. There's no shame in living to climb another day. On the other hand, you can't spend all day planning. Time is not on your side here, as time wasted will drain on your various health bars. The other genre tag Cairn champions is survival. Unlike with everything else in the game, there are serious consequences for failing to take care of Ava's needs. There are 4 you must consider: your hunger, thirst, warmth, and your overall health. If you neglect your meters for too long, they'll turn red, causing them to drain much faster than before and deal damage to Ava's overall health as you climb, which compounds as more and more bars drop. And if any of your survival bars drop to 0, Ava is knocked out, exacerbating the issue even further by leaving Ava hanging from the mountainside for who knows how long. All this to say, you're heavily incentivized to keep these bars in the white at all times. The supplies in your pack are there to restore those needs, but there's only so much room, so you'll need to find more supplies along the way if you're gonna survive. And even when you find those things, it's not like mountainside garlic and raspberries are gonna fix you right up. Quick question for those in the back: does anyone have any idea how many calories are in a handful of raspberries? Just a handful, 2 hands worth of raspberries? Anybody? It ain't potato soup is what I'm getting at, but you can cook it into something more substantial if you find a bivouac point. These markings signal where Ava can set up her tent, and they allow her to perform various actions that are essential to your survival. Most importantly, cooking, but also sleeping, taping up injuries to maintain good grip, and repairing damaged pitons. It is exceptionally rare to find a bivouac point on the side of the cliff face, so you'll need to explore the various caves and man-made structures that dot the mountainside if you want to turn your scavenged supplies into genuine goods. This loop is what encourages the player and Ava to actually explore the landscape as you climb. The overall goal is up, Ava won't let you forget that, but you will quickly run out of food and water if you soldier upward without seeing the sights. In some of these side caves, there are quests to complete, characters to meet, and permanent upgrades that may just save your life as you brave the dangers ahead. Or maybe it's the source of the danger itself. No one said that humans were the only creatures on Mount Kami. I am not the biggest fan of survival elements generally, but when implemented well, a survival system can incentivize a deeper understanding of the game's mechanics, or force the player to explore outside their safe zones for better supplies. And Cairn's survival crafting system does both of these things. It's a great system. Taken as a whole, all of these mechanics exist to put the player in a considered state of mind. Survey the mountainside, admire and study the rock surface, visualize your path forward. Consider your limb movements, Ava's breathing, when and where to place pitons, and furthermore, are there hidey holes in the side of the mountain that can act as both places to rest and a potential source of resources? Any mistakes are often recoverable if you adequately prepared and gave yourself a safety net, but compounding mistakes can be life-threatening. As I entered the late game, I could never find enough water to keep myself healthy, which produced 2 competing stressors. I needed to cover as much ground as possible, but I also needed to be thorough in searching for springs, waterfalls, or discarded bottles of water left by previous climbers so I wouldn't die of dehydration. It can get pretty intense in the late game, and something I've neglected to mention till now is that those bivouac points are your only true save points in this game. A detail I love is when you're spending a long time on a wall, the game will tell you how long it's been since your last bivouac point, both telling you that you should probably find a save soon, and reminding you of just how much a failure here would cost. Imagine it. If you die, you lose everything you've done for the past 20 minutes. Even quitting the game is just a quick save, which is deleted upon re-entry. The game will not let you cheat the mountain. You have to climb it. No one else can do it for you. And before we go any further, I'm about to talk about Cairn's story, so if all of this sounded interesting to you and you think that you're definitely into the game and therefore don't need to be told anything more about it, get off now. Go ahead and move on to the next chapter mark in this video if you want to skip all the story stuff. And also, and I didn't do this on purpose, there's actually a DLC for Cairn that's going to come out in like 2 months' time from this video's release, so it's a great time to pick up Cairn. You should do so. I love this game, genuinely. Anyway, back to the script that I wrote. I know I've painted a picture of a truly cruel and unrelenting game with these mechanics, and that is accurate. Cairn is a grueling experience, but it does want you to succeed. Literally, every time I've talked about difficulty in games, I have to mention Celeste, and it's kind of the perfect time to talk about it because that is also a game about climbing a mountain, so this is actually the only video where it's completely justified. Bite me. Celeste is a very punishing platformer, but Celeste's story is one of overcoming hardship, accepting yourself and others, and understanding that climbing the mountain is undeniably hard, but that's the point. Battleline argues that they should head home because they can't do it. They shouldn't try because the mountain is too much for them, but that's precisely why Madeline is here. She wants to try because it's hard, to prove that she can, to prove that it's possible for someone like her to do this. Celeste is a game with punishing mechanics, but a story that encourages the player to reach the peak. Cairn is also a game about a mountain climb with punishing mechanics, and though the game wants you to succeed, at least I think so, the story does not. It is not encouraging. If anything, Ava receives constant pressure to stop climbing the mountain, but she refuses that call. If Celeste is a story of self-actualization, Cairn's story is one of perseverance and obsession. Ava's family back home sends messages through the Climbot. Her partner and publicist call constantly. Other people on the mountain also talk to her, all of them trying to pick at her reasoning for climbing, and eventually, why she's so driven to do this. And why this mountain? The most dangerous climb in the world, one no one has ever completed with their lives intact. Strewn up and down the entire mountain are plenty of final messages left by various climbers. Some are left by people who gave up and went back down, but an almost more common case are notes left on corpses of someone lamenting their final moments alone in the cold. Each body a mirror, each one an Ava who didn't make it, each one a version of you who made a careless mistake. And though Cairn repeatedly questions why Ava is doing this, she doesn't provide an answer, or at least not a concrete one. It's more of a feeling than something she arrived at with logic, and maybe that's the most accurate way to get across this feeling. I will not tell you the ending of Cairn. You will have to make it there yourself if you want to find out what lies at the summit. Cairn is punishing, but I think it wants you to succeed. It wants you to see the ending, because the only thing that comes close to an answer lies at the end. As Ava is pushed to the brink, and you see her suffer so much to make it to the top of the mountain, even when no one's saying it, there's an implicit why that lies at the heart of Ava's character. It's a question that is quite personal for some at the studio. In an interview with Remap Radio, the CEO of the game bakers, Audrey LaPrince, revealed that her father was a mountaineer who would do this exact thing in her childhood. Cairn is, in some way, LaPrince trying to understand her father's drive to do something so dangerous over and over again. What drives these alpine climbers to leave the world behind, to climb some of the most hostile structures on Earth, alone, at great mortal risk of failure, with their families worrying as the days accumulate that maybe, even now, they're lost in that mountain, never to return? Ava doesn't know why she is this way, but if the game has an answer, it's at the summit. A moment that honestly surpasses words. I couldn't describe it to you if I wanted to, but it's striking, it's honest, it's raw, and I'm still trying to make sense of it, to be honest. Ava is a prickly and tenacious character who gives up everything to be on the mountains. She's flawed, but she's still human. Cairn may not understand why people in real life would do something so challenging, but it wants to, and that process has led to an absolutely captivating and empathetic piece of art and a perfect video game, one that I think everyone should experience. You know what I just realized? In choosing not to show you Cairn's ending, I've recreated the ending to Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. Remember this one? It's a rage climbing game where you use an odd control scheme to climb an unyielding trash mountain. I referenced it way earlier in this video. Well, if you've never made it to the ending, this is what screen will greet you. A warning for those who are playing the game for an audience to not tell that audience what lies beyond the door. When I was younger, I hated this, but this is actually perfect for the experience Foddy is trying to produce. Getting Over It doesn't really have a story, per se. What bits of dialogue the game has are more an explanation of the game than a true narrative, or a tongue-in-cheek encouragement after a devastating loss. No, the story of Getting Over It is the interaction between player and mechanics. Are you, the player, capable of persevering through these unwieldy controls, uncompromising mountainside, and debatably annoying host to make it to the top of the mountain? The true ending of the game being hidden from view is a failsafe placed at the end. This game is about getting over it after all, it being your failures, and there's nothing gained in watching a YouTuber complete the trek. As Bennett puts it, like a baby bird eating chewed up food. If you want to know what's behind this screen, you're gonna have to do it yourself. Getting Over It is a pure experience in that way. There's little to distract from the mechanics and your own experience of persevering through any adversity. But a pure experience is necessarily a singular one. There is one idea here, expressed well, but this game is only about getting over it. For a game with a more complicated outlook on difficulty and perseverance and some actual characters to explore these ideas, one does not need to look far from the Foddy tree. Released in 2025, Baby Steps is a game that you play at your own risk. Baby Steps is a quote-unquote walking sim co-developed by Maxi Bosch, Gabe Cozillo, and Bennett Foddy, who've all worked together in the past on Ape Out, but Foddy is the notable one here, because of his particular brand of game design which Baby Steps is in conversation with. Control schemes that make movement so abstract as to make them completely alien to the player, games with punishing challenges and no rewards, where the struggle itself is the point, not losing, nor winning, which does set it apart from the get good game genre. Anyone's Souls game is hard, sure, but you are still supposed to win this, or else they wouldn't shower you with rewards for doing so. The death animations, the bosses dead text, souls, items, progress through the world, there's all this UX work that goes into making you feel good for a job well done. Not so in Foddy's games. There is some reward for success, but it's often subdued and fleeting. The true reward is your own satisfaction for having bested the challenge. Baby Steps complicates this structure a bit, choosing instead to explore the ideas of strife and perseverance narratively, which is a new tactic for a Foddy game. You know, it's kind of rude calling this a Foddy game, right? I won't do that again. Yes, I will be focusing specifically on Foddy in this video, despite this being a 3-person project, and that's because Baby Steps is in conversation with Foddy's overall game design philosophy, and he has more titles to his name. But this is going to have a diminishing effect on the other two, make it seem like Foddy's the auteur of this process, or like the other devs are really just extensions of the Foddy collective like Hideo Kojima in his ilk. But make no mistake, these two are great artists who made a great game, likely made fantastic contributions I cannot fathom, and deserve stars, suckers, and kisses on their blushing, beautiful foreheads. They are both instrumental parts of this game's development and creation. I just have more to say about Foddy. Sorry in advance to Gabe and Maxi. But if you'd like to hear more from the other two, you could hear a lot more from Cozillo in interviews and press materials, and Maxi appears in some written interviews, which I of course recommend. With that disclaimer out of the way, how does Baby Steps narrativize the struggle of Foddy's games? What's the story here? Our protagonist is Nate, a piece of human garbage that seems to spend most of his time watching anime and eroding couch cushions, until one day he is magicked away to a strange other world. And that's it. That's all the setup you're given. With nothing else to do, you'll put one foot in front of the other, onward and upward. There's a guy, Jim, who attempts to explain the sitch and help Nate out, but Nate flatly refuses any of his offerings. So you go forth, without a purpose and without shoes, to find Nate a good place to pee. Perhaps you've noticed that Nate's walking is a little bit wonky, and that's because he is a weird man to pilot. Weird, but simple. The triggers lift the corresponding legs, emphasis on the triggers part. You need to play this game with a controller, or at least something with an analog input, because the height of the raised leg corresponds to how far you squeeze the trigger, which is really nice for precision placement of your feet. This makes Baby Steps one of the few games that actually requires that sort of trigger control, which is kind of upsetting when you think about it. More games should take advantage of their controller hardware. Anyway, triggers lift a leg, and then moving the stick moves the leg in space, dropping back down after you release the trigger. In practice, moving forward feels more like falling forward and letting your extended leg catch you, which isn't an inaccurate way to describe walking, really. This must have been intended, given the tongue-in-cheek walking sim descriptor, but most walking sim protagonists are a little more practiced at locomotion than Nate is. It's a steep learning curve to figure out how to move this guy without falling every couple meters, and the game immediately throws you into the fire because there's no real tutorial. You just gotta kinda figure it out, dude. The world of Baby Steps is loaded with optional collectibles, curios, and cutscenes to discover, but there is no map, or more accurately, Nate refused the map, so your own curiosity drives the exploration. The dialogue is witty and intentionally cringe. Nate can be a hard guy to listen to for an entire game, but there's a lot of charm in the stuttery, improvisational way these characters communicate. Though I will warn, this game is gross. Lots of potty humor in this, and penises. Big, floppy penises. There's a nudity warning when the game begins that I didn't take seriously enough, and I'm telling you not to make my mistake. They mean nudity, dude. Regardless, all this story talk assumes that you can actually make it through the trials and tribulations ahead, and while this game is absolutely hard, it's not as bad as you'd first expect. If Nate controlled like a clop, this would all be impossible, but the truth is the controls are responsive and well implemented. Nate has pinpoint precision on where his feet go, and eventually I learned I could kind of gingerly place the foot down to see if I could maintain balance before I let go of the trigger completely. The controls aren't intuitive, but they're probably the most responsive and easy to use of Mr. Foddy's movement systems. It's just that Baby Steps asks a lot of you. The game is long. HowLongToBeat.com suggests your first playthrough will be about 13 hours. Mine was 15. And you can see it. No matter how far you fall, you can always see the top of the next cliff and the mountain towering in the distance. But there are also these little vignettes lying about the area that may draw your interest. What's up with that giant red ball over there? The river of milk? The tower I was explicitly told not to climb because there's supposedly nothing there. I was told twice, actually. You know, I bet there's something up there. Screw you, Mark. I'm going up anyway. Those are the two goals. Not unlike Cairn, the narrative goal is to travel upwards, so Nate can finally take a wee, and the sideways goal of exploring the world and completing optional challenges also draws your interest. One of the biggest surprises I had when playing Baby Steps, though, is just how much of the challenge is self-motivated. In getting over it, there is only the wall. You can spend time trying to scale it, break it down, somehow crawl under it, but the only thing to do in that game is get over it. That's what I meant earlier when I called it a pure game. But Baby Steps' main path, the upwards goal, if it can be said to have one, is just a hike. Sure, there are some various do-or-die scenarios, but if you just keep walking, it rarely asks you for more than don't slip on this slick slide of slippery sludge. Oh, and you couldn't even do that? I hate you, Nate. No, the true struggle lies in those optional challenges. I am so damn close to reaching that fruit, but the slightest mistake will send me down the hill and set me back minutes, perhaps entire play sessions worth of progress. And when getting back takes 15 minutes on its own, how willing would you be to give this a second try? How many attempts do you think you'd have in you before you'd give up? Inside of 3 attempts, I spent 4 minutes on the challenge itself and 45 just walking back. There are so many other oddities to be found in this wild world. Do you really need that fruit? Just move on, it's fine, the game whispers in your ear. Whether or not you persevere is a bet the designers make against you, and you must prove your strength of will to get it done. In summation, this is also a game about getting over it. It's got more rewards for your struggle, and funny cutscenes greet you at every turn, but it's still a game about falling down and deciding to get back up again. But I don't blame you if you don't. There are many challenges I gave up on. I did give up on this one. There was only one challenge where I really stuck to my guns, which is interesting because narratively, it was the one instance where I should have just given up. What you're seeing here is Manbreaker, Baby Steps' most iconic challenge, partially because of its interesting approach to difficulty, and because of the narrative framing. Like most challenges in the game, Manbreaker is completely optional. There's a spiral stairwell that leads all the way to the top, allowing you to easily surpass the challenge below, but here's the thing. Jim, remember Jim? Helpful Guide Jim? He made these stairs, and by this point in my playthrough, these two have developed a real enmity for each other. I've destroyed artifacts of worship, denied Jim's help at every turn. Even when the alternative would be dying, Nate still refuses Jim's help. And at this final juncture, Nate insults his magnum opus, asserting that the Manbreaker is a cakewalk. He'll just walk right up it, maybe take 30 minutes at best. Rightfully enraged, Jim refuses to let you up the stairs unless you call him Lord of the Stairs, which of course Nate refuses to do. With this, the stakes are set. Take the Manbreaker, stubbornly proving your climbing ability, or just take the stairs at the ego cost of calling Jim Lord of the Stairs. My choice should be obvious. Couple of notes on Manbreaker. This hike is the most getting over it bit in the entire game. It is designed such that any mistake you make anywhere along the path sends you all the way down to the bottom, with a couple of exceptions. You could fall here, you could fall here, and you can even fall here right before the very end, as much as you need to figure out these final steps. But for most of the journey, it's a trip straight to hell, and every time those stairs call out to you, just take the damn stairs, Nate. But if we really ponder Manbreaker, as I have for hours of my life, there is something kind of wonderful about this challenge. It's the next to last challenge before the credits, and the climb is rewarding. Chris Person put it best in an article he wrote for Aftermath.site. Quote, "What makes the Manbreaker so punishing is not that the individual steps are harder than what you've faced, it's that there's a lot of them. This is the penultimate test of your patience, and while beginner's luck will take you far, the more you get in your head, the more you cut corners, the more likely Manbreaker is to slug you in the jaw, and you will deserve it. And let's not forget that this is self-inflicted. That changes the calculus too. Just like with every challenge in the game, no one is telling me to toil on this cliff face. In fact, I was explicitly told not to. So why am I doing this? To avoid calling Jim Lord? Is this effort really worth that? And the answer, for Nate at least, is yes. Nate is a complicated character. On the one hand, he's dead simple. You can guess what Nate will do in every cutscene because he refuses help from everyone, paradoxically because he doesn't want to come across as weak, but also because he does not want to be seen as a burden. But the reasons why Nate is this way are left ambiguous. My personal theory is that Nate was a normal guy once, and something happened to him that reduced him to living in his parents' basement, which is where all that shame comes from. To say nothing of Nate being, a man. Men aren't supposed to suffer this visibly, and certainly not share that with others, which both accentuate the shame. Regardless, in the real world, Nate was no better than a baby, and now finds himself in a world that is steeped in baby metaphors. From the gameplay, the title, his outfit, the obsession with milk and mothers, and the various allusions to Pinocchio, with Jim the Guide and the horse people. Nate is suffering, and he needs to grow up, but he has so far been incapable of improving himself, until he's teleported here, where he perpetuates those problems unto others. But mostly Jim. He could have let Jim, a man whose literal purpose is to be a guide to newcomers, do his job, but he refused at every turn, and Jim resents him for it. To put it simply, Nate is chronically depressed, and through the lens of depression, the entire game takes on a new context. How the simplest of acts feel impossible to complete, and also how your brain is often your biggest enemy, being trapped in your own head, incapable of getting up, incapable of taking care of yourself, even if you know it's for the best. How you push people away, and how annoying that behavior is for the people around you when all they're trying to do is help. And even the less empathetic parts, the ugly stuff we don't want to admit about depression, like how it makes you a target of mockery by onlookers and outsiders, like the horse people. How pathetic and ridiculous it makes you feel, and you project that onto others. I can't let them see that I'm a train wreck. I can't let them know how disgusting I feel inside. And how that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You make it harder for anyone to be around you, and all of that is true alongside the suffering and the clear need for help. Everyone can try their best to help Nate through it, but Nate's got to take that first step. If this were getting over it, Manbreaker would be the final challenge, and it would be the right choice, a virtuous struggle. But Baby Steps isn't about getting over it, it's about how we get in the way of ourselves. Not all struggle is virtuous. If you attempt the Manbreaker as I did, take some time to consider why you're doing that. Not Nate's reason, your reason. What do you gain from beating this challenge? A sense of pride? Access to some special club? A t-shirt? Or is it simply the fact that a cutscene would play where Nate would call Jim Lord and you don't want that? Because Baby Steps sees no value in that, and it sees no value in your empty struggle. If you succeed in this quest, there is no reward at the top. Nate sacrificed his time and some bones, but he gave nothing of his pride or shame, and thus learned nothing. The guide jumps off the side of the mountain, his purpose in life fully invalidated by Nate's final refusal, and Nate is left alone. Alternatively, if you admit that Nate can't do this alone, Jim will give him a reward, though a mocking one, and the game gives you an achievement, the meta-narrative tipping its hand as to which path was the correct one. Nate does not climb Manbreaker for virtuous struggle like the pot man, he climbs to avoid change. Nate and I fell off Manbreaker over and over, but that cost us naught of our humility, just time. It took me 15 hours to beat Baby Steps, and a third of that time was spent on just Manbreaker. I beat Manbreaker for the challenge, to prove that I could, and it just made Nate look like an even more petulant idiot than he had been all game, denying anyone around him the chance to help a man so clearly in need of it. This is not challenge for challenge's sake. This is easy compared to the challenge of admitting fault, to letting others into your life in and admitting out loud that you are depressed, that you are suffering quietly every day because to ask for help is wounding. That toxic masculine pride, which you barely even have, is still rearing its head, mixing with whatever's in your brain that causes you to forget everything. What day it is, what time it is, that you need to do the laundry, to shower, to write more, to do anything. The combination of feeling the need to do something, but being incapable of escaping your brain, and masculinity telling you that that suffering, that pain, that anguish is noble. You'll figure it out on your own, but you won't. You'll be just like Nate, pathetic in your pride. Baby Steps is notable for being a get-good game that thinks your get-good mindset is stupid, and it will laugh at you throughout your struggle, just as the NPCs and even you have been laughing at Nate all game long. The fusion of player character and avatar complete as you both struggle against the Manbreaker. It is only through the player accepting humility that Nate can do the same, which runs counter to all community wisdom around get-good games. No wonder so many articles are written on Manbreaker specifically. It's a wicked smart application of narrative and design to comment on how people play games like this, and tell a completely unrelated story about toxic masculinity and depression. Basically, it's a good game. I wondered how Baby Steps would end, and though a game as grotesque as this one wouldn't go out with some sort of heartfelt message, Nate does change, just a little. Whether that change becomes something greater or if he reverts to old habits is up to him. In order to receive help, to admit there's something wrong, Nate must first learn to stop being his own worst enemy and help himself. Let others in, take in their criticisms, apply it, and try to meaningfully change. And all that takes effort, putting one foot in front of the other every day. And that is the hard part. It's interesting thinking about the fact that both of these games are asking questions of why you're climbing the mountain. Cairn, Celeste even, Baby Steps. And Cairn is empathetic and loves people, fundamentally, I think, but also that is a game that is saturated in its subject. It is a game that's about climbers. Baby Steps is using its mechanics to metaphorically talk about what it means to suffer through depression and suffer through pride. Baby Steps is talking about people. It's talking about men. It's talking about me. I'm not saying that Baby Steps is better than Cairn. It's not. But sitting here, depressed out of my gourd, trying to talk to doctors about why I can't think anymore, why since COVID I've not been able to think correctly, and how it's being a massive drain on my life, that was the first step. Telling the people in my life that I'm suffering, that was my Manbreaker. At the risk of saying something a little too cute, you gotta break that image of man inside of you if you want to improve. And for that reason, Baby Steps is kind of closer to my chest, even if I think that Cairn is a more beautiful game and a better game. But both of these games, all of these games, use the climbing mechanic and their stories to communicate different realities to the player, whether that is using their mechanics to drive you to playing the game the correct way, as with the arcadey ones, or the mechanics are trying to make you understand something about someone that you've never understood before, or yourself. And for that reason, climbing games are just pretty cool, dude. That's your thesis statement. They're good. Play them. No outro for this video. I think that this has gone on long enough. I'm Superdude. Thank you for watching.